Hello, everyone, and happy holidays, and welcome to Ventures. Today's episode is with Saul Cates, and he is a cybersecurity expert and cloud expert at Thales. And this end of year episode is a bit of a random show. We do talk about cybersecurity and things that he is an expert in, but we also dive into rapid antigen tests for COVID-19 here. We talk about technical training for entrepreneurs. We talk about the Enneagram, we talk about New Year's resolutions, and a variety of other topics. So, quick word from our sponsors that make this show possible. At full disclosure, I am an operator investor in these companies. Number one, Satchel. Satchel is a simplified online newsletter and publishing platform that simplifies the process of communication between creators and their audience. It allows their audience to subscribe to specific topics so that people can get the information they are most interested in, as well as a whole variety of other features. We're in private alpha right now, but I'm happy to get you in. So if you go to wclittle.com, you'll see my example Satchel site. It's where I send out all my newsletters and do all my communications with folks. And so go to satchel.works and you'll be able to apply to become a creator there. Number two, Startup Rocket. StartupRocket.com is a place for you to get advice, practical coaching and advice if you're starting and building a startup. And it leverages countless hours of material across human-centered design, design thinking, traditional business plan, lean startup, all those materials that you need at different stages of your journey. You'll be able to have customized learning experiences, as well as a place for you and your team to put together your plan most effectively to be able to communicate that with mentors and advisors along the way. And number three, Bird Buddy. Bird Buddy is a smart bird feeder that just passed $3 million raised on Kickstarter. So if you go to mybirdbuddy.com, you'll be able to check out this cool device that allows you to live stream birds that are visiting you on your property. And it takes photos, uses AI to recognize what bird it is. And it's an amazing gift idea. It'll be available later this year. So pre-order on Kickstarter, go to mybirdbuddy.com. So with this episode, if you are listening, you can actually watch by visiting wclittle.com. And there you'll see more extensive show notes to the things that we talk about today. And if you're watching, you can also listen anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can just search for Ventures. So with that, please enjoy this conversation with Saul Cates. All right, Saul, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, man. Happy to be here.
So you are an expert in cloud and cybersecurity, and I'm curious to learn a little bit more about your background, and for the entrepreneurs, investors, those in the startup community that are listening in, curious for them to get to know you a little bit here.
Well, you're lucky you've known me for 15 something years now, so I'll bore everybody else with a little bit of history of me, and please, tell me to shut it up if I need to. So my background is in cyber, and cloud is definitely something I grew up in as it evolved. But my real background is in computer science in general. I've always had a job in some kind of tech industry, everything from I did tech support. I've done QA. I used to work at a company called Symantec, you guys might know of, back in the 90s. I used to blow up viruses in labs and see what happened. That was one of my jobs at one point. So I've tried everything I can. And if you look at my history and you look just even Google me, I've tried a lot of stuff. I've been at companies like Tripwire and Signature, so I've done my shares of startups. But I really spent a lot of my time in history at a company called Formetric, which ultimately was acquired by this company here, Thales, about 4 years ago. And so through all that, I've tried every hat I can think of, from marketing and sales to innovation. I've done the acceleration. I've figured out how to make a team out of nothing and make them leaders. So I think I've tried everything I could try. And I found my favorite thing was technology. And if you look at cloud and cyber, in particular, it's just problems, right? People think that everything has got this special magic to it. It doesn't. Everything's fairly straightforward, actually. Knowledge comes from some way of collection. I'm an experimenter and observer. That's how I learned the best. So people would have called me a hacker back in the day. I was, again, throwing viruses, see what happened. At one point in my life, I was in a room that I can't tell you about, doing things with people that I don't even know their real names, playing games, trying to do things like kill roots in an operating system called Linux, right? Or Unix, as actually was at the time. And I did that at 19, right? So take that forward into products and industry. I've definitely had my hands and touched a lot of different problems in all of those places: cyber, cloud, those transformations from going physical to virtual. Every single time those things happen, I was probably in a room somewhere with a drawing or some kind of architecture team saying, "Hey, how do we kill this thing that we don't trust?" Right? It's that game that I've been playing for most of my life, and cloud and cyber are just big pieces of that. And now, as an adult, I've grown up into this industry, and I look sort of out at the world, and if I had to say what my expertise is, it is problem solving and sort of leadership, but through the lens of a lot of these events that have happened recently, like cloud and cybersecurity. That cybersecurity, just to be clear, is not a thing. It's a practice, right? It's not something you buy. It's a team you invest in, or a process you try to continue to evolve. I hear people say things like zero trust, and I will stop here in a second. Well, for any question you might want to follow on, but things like zero trust is a great example of like an idea, but like that's like one approach to something. Like, I'm going to trust nothing. But that is a cool idea. But for me, I like the idea of epsilon, right? Approaching zero, but never actually trusting it, right? The epsilon of absolute zero is what I look for in everything I see. So when I think cyber and those types of things, what I'm really looking for is, when I look at a given problem area, how do I take an epsilon zero approach to saying, I trust nothing here? And then everything from there that doesn't meet that reality is probably a solution for me to make money on. Simple as that. So never let a good problem go to waste is probably the short answer if you're going into this business. But there's lots of problems out there, because a lot of times innovation creates these big gaps, and you got to fill something with those gaps. Those gaps got to be filled, right? And security is quite often one of those things you hear knock on the door, say, "Hey, I got a solution for you. Here's some Band-Aids. I'll sell it to you." If you can get the if you can get the cloud and just the design of like this new era of cloud native, declarative, and this new design change you're seeing, if that becomes more of the reality, I think we'll have less of that security after the fact and more security by design. So I think there is a shift that's going to happen that your community might be very familiar with, like cloud native and going into things like containers and stuff like that. This new era is actually going to be that first time that cyber, and the security aspects can probably be either built in early or bolted on, and nobody has to be the wiser. That's a fundamental shift. That's not what it was when I was 19 years old in a room trying to kill root, right?
So I will look forward to a proper podcast episode on all things cybersecurity. But for our purposes here, as we're sort of the end of the year here,
yeah,
for the entrepreneurs listening in, to kind of put it relatively succinctly, what in coming into 2021 for either young startups or growing startups, or most of the people listening in are probably at the very early stages. When you talk about security by design, what are the considerations? If it's not a thing you buy, if it's a process, what should these entrepreneurs be thinking about?
I can be very simple for you. So as concise as I can, follow a very good framework that you're comfortable with. One of the ones that I promote right away is just look up cloud native in the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. I think is what they're calling it. It's part of the Linux Foundation. It's basically 6 things that a team usually does that is cloud native. And so it's usually around containerization, declarative APIs, pipelines and CI/CDs. Like, it's all the things you say and you put down in your business plans. But if you're a startup going out the doors, like, I need something on this canvas. This canvas of my startup is too blank for me. So how I do it, I probably need some guidance, like some paint by numbers, and then things like the CNCF and things like the Cloud Security Alliance. These are great frameworks to sort of look at as guidance towards where you want to go, right? Some of it's going to be more that's like here's tools, techniques, and things to do like CNCF does, and here's philosophy, process, and so forth that like the Cloud Security Alliance does. So if I was coaching somebody that's coming on board for the first time and I'm going to go and build a service, a cloud service or something, and I know I will have to secure it. Most things nowadays, you're not getting away from it. GDPR, I mean, you're not avoiding this conversation with anybody anytime soon. So get good at figuring out, how do I find somebody that just does it for me? Good cloud vendors for that. Look for good SaaS solutions that are, compliant with the things you need to do. If you are building your own tools and software, get a team and get tools that just get that security edge by default or by design of just the security framework they have available. Or sometimes you might have to go get people with expertise on this. There are tons of companies out there that do that, like, big SIs and all the way down to, you might see it in your incubators and innovators network that you can pull on. But that's the hardest part, is finding good cyber expertise at the beginning of your journey, because it's expensive. Getting cyber expertise is expensive because it's the world's most expensive insurance. You just hope you're not that other guy, right? A good example, I think you guys were probably, you were talking about this a little earlier, like the SolarWinds event that just happened, right? Yeah. It's a supply chain compromise, espionage, all that whole thing, right? It's all the fun, buzzy words in my world, right? And that's a company that got owned, but it's an old company. I remember using SolarWinds technology at Symantec back in the 90s. I mean, we used that to actually manage our routers. It was SNMP traps, and that's how you talk to your devices. There was no management consoles and stuff. SolarWinds was the tool you had. That company's been around forever. So them being compromised, however they were compromised, I don't want to go into the details, but it doesn't matter. They were sitting there so long that they definitely weren't covering every aspect of their cybersecurity risk. So it wasn't something they bought, and it wasn't a one-time event. It's an entire life cycle process that you must maintain. Cybersecurity is expensive, right? It's got a whole life cycle experience that goes with it. And if you take your eye off the ball, even for a second, you can be like they are, or you can be like the guys that we hire to go clean up the mess, like FireEye and Mandiant and others. Those guys just got compromised. Even guys like me, I'm trying to climb myself off the roof at all times, or ceiling at all times, because you have to be completely paranoid to be successful with this. And that's why, again, that epsilon zero statement I made earlier is like, you can never trust anything. So the shortest answer to it is find somebody that cares about this more than you do. If you're the startup guy, really do, because it's expensive. And if you can find teams, tools, or some place to rent it from, like a cloud provider, do it, because it's going to be expensive in the long run. But do it. Definitely make it a priority. You have to do it. You can't avoid it. That's the only caveat to that statement. You still have to deal with it.
Well, that piece of advice alone, I'll make sure to put links into what we're talking about there, and I'm sure there's probably other links that you can send along as well that we'll put in the show notes. Sure. So end of the year here, obviously there's been we're all collectively ready to move on from 2020 here. I wanted to touch briefly on sort of rapid antigen tests, technical founder training, what you and I have been learning about the Enneagram, and just kind of New Year's resolution advice that and things that we've learned over the years of going in and out of different New Year's resolutions. But first, on the topic of these rapid antigen tests, it's shocking to me that we do not have these earlier. So over the last couple of months, we've realized that the technology exists to do a quick nose swab, and in a matter of minutes, similar to a pregnancy test, have 2 lines show up if you are actively shedding SARS-CoV-2.
Yeah.
Why doesn't this technology exist? Why doesn't these kits?
Why does that implementation not exist? Right? The text there, no implementation.
It should be in every house, on our living room tables, in all of our cars, so that whenever we're going anywhere, we could test ourselves real quick and would know whether we're shedding the virus the fact that this hasn't been rolled out is really sad. So I wrote up a whole post, a primer, I'll link to it, on vaccines, contagiousness, rapid antigen tests, the difference between antigen tests and the antibody tests. Antibodies tell whether or not you have the antibodies for it. Antigens test whether you are actively shedding the virus, which is arguably the most important, because if we just had those tests in our cars, we could stop this thing quickly. So I'll link to all the different resources. I want to at least give a quick shout out to have people who want to learn more check out my article. Any things that you're thinking about with regard to this whole testing and just how the whole world is operating here?
Yeah, no, I mean, so as an observer, because I'm not directly, affected by that as the supply chain or anything, but as an observer of the general problem set, right? Supply chain is a problem, and just in general, and trying to activate a short, going from idea to solution, just as if you have all the supply chain already worked out, even then it's still a challenge, right? So trying to go from needing something to having something without the proper alignments across industry, governments, and just good leadership, it's been causing a lot of problems for why things that we obviously think are the right things to do haven't happened the way they should. And I don't know how to solve that as just an observer, but I can say that it is ridiculous that something as simple as what I would equate to a litmus or a pregnancy test level of sophistication for manufacturing. Why are we not massively trying to manufacture something to that same level of Kleenex or mask level convenience? Right, I can quickly find out I am a threat, so I need to isolate for my family's sake. Right. I need more tools, and this is one of those tools I need because I can't go see family like I want to, right? So these are the type of things that would help. I agree. I'm just as frustrated. I don't have a simple answer other than we've got to shorten the alignment of decisions, across these multiple friction points. I think is the part I see the most.
Yeah,
because I do agree. The tech is there. There's no logistical excuse.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So for those listening, those watching, look at your show notes, go click the links. There's a big community forming, a few talking heads that are making some noise about this, but we need the politicians and the policymakers and those that can actually affect change here to pay attention to this, because even if the vaccines do get rolled out, we're still going to need to know whether the vaccines are working, right?
Yes.
And we're going to need to know whether we're actively shedding this virus to spreading it. So take a look at that. All right, next topic, bit of a random show here, end of the year, technical founder training. So when I think it was early 2000s, when I learned to code a little bit in the 90s in school and such, but it wasn't until the early 2000s when I came across an article which was PHP-driven, database-driven programming to build scalable web applications. I tried searching for it because I'd love to send a gift basket whoever wrote that article. But that article changed my life when I realized that I can create dynamic web pages with PHP. I stopped very quickly. I stopped with PHP and moved on to Ruby, and that's when I got Super Ruby on Rails and built a bunch of web properties out there. But the practice of knowing that I can write code to put something useful on the internet that people are going to visit and go buy things based on what they learn, that in the 2000s for me was absolutely life-changing. And that led me into the world of startups, building my own startups, having some exit events, investing in other founders, spending the last 10 years really diving into that operator investor role. I am now, and even along the way, I co-founded a code school called Code Fellows, where we were just seeing people all around the country, really all around the world, drive in to spend a few months in Seattle to learn how to code, and they would turn around and triple their salaries. They'd go from barista to a junior mid-level developer in the matter of a few months. And this is still hot. It's still ridiculously hot. It's extremely important.
My son Anthony is involved in one of the competitors of that. right?
Nice.
So he's in his he's taking his break. I think he'll start back up on Monday, right? So
Good.
this is hot. I agree.
Every student should be doing it. So what I'm doing is I'm teaching a course that is a light speed, an accelerated course to not get into all the computer science details. That takes decades to learn. And if you're listening and you're a high school student or advanced middle school student, you should take as many programming classes as you can, do it in college, like learn. That being said, you can definitely self-teach in the same way that you're putting together Legos. You can figure out how to put together different libraries to bring experiences alive in web browsers and mobile devices that you can build your own little technology company. So visit wclittle.com. I have it pinned right on the top, my course for teaching people to learn how to code as an entrepreneur. I'm going to completely self-promote here, but I'm doing it because I'm hoping that students come across that article in the same way that I came across that database-driven PHP tutorial 20 years ago. And even if it's only one person that ends up using that to learn something, it'll be totally worth it. So I don't know. When did you were dinking around with code way back in the day?
Dude, 6 years old, man. My only toy was a computer at 6. So we had this TI 99, I think it was. It didn't have the recording device because didn't have enough money for it. So I had to rewrite every game I wanted to play. And the only game I had at 6 years old was in a magazine, and it was called Pitfall. I hate Pitfall. So since then, I learned how to write a new game every day since then. So programming for me, it was a expression of toys to me. And so fast forward to most of my life, I look at programming as not even a language, it's like using my finger to do something, I lift up and I want that to happen. And I think what you were saying and you were promoting a second ago, I 1,000% agree. Even Anthony going into this, I was like, hey, you're going into a boot camp, right? You're skipping the line of all the deep knowledge that I went through of just banging on stuff since I was 6, right? That's how I figured out things. I would break things to figure out how they worked, and that's why I didn't make a lot of friends when I was younger. I broke everybody's toys, and my toys were games, and computers. So I got into a lot of trouble in different places. But long story short, I ended up having a very fun, adventurous in life. And at the end of it, my knowledge of computers definitely affects my opinion that you need to take somebody that's willing to take you under their wing and give you the shortcuts to life and coding and the cheat codes, right? There's literally lessons you can skip over in your life. And I 1,000% agree with that. Not to say that it's not valuable to go through that work, but there's a reason expertise is out there. And I do agree in things like master classes. You walk into somebody you want to be your mentor and you say, teach me your ways. And I'm going to add that to my skill set. I've been doing that since I was 6. So I definitely encourage, don't waste a chance to go learn something, but definitely take advantage of master class when you can. Definitely encourage it.
So look up your local coding boot camp. Go there. Obviously, I'm an investor and was the CEO the first year and a half of Code Fellows, so I would highly recommend Code Fellows. If you want the crash course to learn how to build startups as a technical founder, check out my course right now. It's free. I'm just getting feedback from people going as I'm building it out in 2021 here. So again, wclittle.com will take you right there. This is a special time for web and mobile development because the creator of Ruby on Rails, DHH, he's at DHH on Twitter. He just released the stack that they use, that his crew at Basecamp used to build Hey.com, the new email service. He just released a few days ago the HTML over the wire stack that can create reactive modern web and mobile applications. So I was going to be teaching React Native and the whole Redux React paradigm, and I still have some of that in the course, and I think it's important for developers to learn all the things and be exposed. But there's one, if you're learning web development and mobile development, you just need to get good at something. You just need to get really good at one thing. And now it looks like the stack, the Ruby on Rails stack with Hotwire, which uses turbo frames, uses turbo streams, and sending HTML over WebSockets. I now just this morning released a new tutorial so that you can go in and get your Hello World going and check that out. So do all the things, take your boot camp, take your classes in school, self-learn online. It's extremely important coming into the rest of the century here. Highly, highly recommended. Now, next topic, going a little bit more personal. Saul and I, over the holidays here, have been texting each other of things we're learning. I'm a couple years in, so I'm a little bit more of but I'm still relatively late to the party. And this is the topic of the Enneagram. So if you're not familiar with the Enneagram, it sounds weird and cultish and kind of bizarre right out of the gate, but it's actually quite amazing. So what it is a personality typing system that's different than the DISC or Myers-Briggs or the Strengths Finders, the different motivator tests, entrepreneurial tests that are out there. This one's different because it helps you identify the personality that you've put on based on your childhood experiences. And that's different because rather than something like a Myers-Briggs where you're basically one of 16 different buckets, and I'm a huge fan of it, don't get me wrong, but these 9 buckets, these 9 Enneagram types are everybody over the course of their life kind of has different, you can sort of think of it as a 1 to 100% or a 0 to 100% scale of each 9 numbers. And the perfect human being has the best of all 9 numbers, right? So you're not just whatever your type is. However, because life is imperfect and because of life experiences and things, the ups and downs of our lives, we tend to gear toward one number or another. And this has all kinds of profound implications for our professional lives, how we interact with others, our teams that we're building, and then in our personal lives, right? Relationship with significant others and our kids and our close friends. Yeah. And so I think it's important. I'm curious to hear how you're processing it because you're relatively new to the scene. I mean, we're both extremely late to the party, but you being relatively new to the scene, what sort of things are you learning?
Well, first, there's a lot to learn. I found that out, right? I think the first thing that I took to your point you just said is it. At first, I was trying to figure out what type I was, right? And like which box am I in? Because I know more about myself now, but I don't like boxes. Period. I hate being in them. I find them to be irrelevant. I don't like rules. Like all these great things. So naturally, I'm a 7, right? If you look at what on it, I end up being the 7. Because I do challenge a lot of ideas. I constantly want innovation. I constantly want change. I don't sit still very well, but there's so much nuances in a 7 and what a 7 is that you and we're both 7s, at least that's what we typed ourselves, but we're definitely different. We act different. We process information different. We lead differently. We work in different worlds. We share a lot of the same visions and beliefs in some cases, but we do definitely come from different perspectives. So I think the big takeaway early is while there's these 9 sort of core types, you are a bit of everything, but you will have your cores you're lean to, and you can start to leverage everything. You can actually. I'm still really new to this, but just the nature of me, and you know me, I go in deep and I become the master of it as fast as I can. So this type of stuff, for my needs, I see it as really enlightening, particularly on those connections to others. How do I better collaborate, open up a dialogue with my spouse, or, have a tough conversation with a child, or figure out what we're going to do as a next big business decision, right? Those all now are things that I have interesting tools in this new framework, right? That I didn't know about 3 weeks ago. That's how new I am to it. Like it's literally 3 weeks in, but I feel I'm pretty confident I'm on the right track to where I know I need to go with it. I don't feel scared about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas like if you look at the Myers-Briggs you brought up earlier, I look at that one as like a formula I would run if I was running McKinsey or Deloitte or something, like put the formula in the engine and out comes your team A, B, and C that you're going to go and build on, right? That's how an engineer and an accountant will solve the problem. I think the bringing the relationship together, the Enneagram really just takes that all to the other side and says, no, it's about the connections of people and yourself and the community and all that as well. So it's the psychology and psychiatry that I see more than anything else in it, not the cultish part that I did initially see, because you see a diagram, you're like, oh boy, I'm out.
We're going pagan worship here. Yeah, although it's very popular in the Catholic communities. The Catholics sort of jokingly refer to it as the Catholic horoscope. But it's super popular now in secular corporate environments, and people are using it everywhere. And so anyway,
it's starting to show up in those plans, those corporate plans. You're seeing it like in their training now more and more. So it's definitely popping up.
For sure. And I have a number of friends that are professional Enneagram coaches, and it's, a lot of therapists are moving in to become specifically trained in the Enneagram as a tool to help their patients. So briefly, so let's just run through them real quick. I'm going to start with a 2. I'll come back around to a 1. You'll see why, because 2, 3s, and 4s are the heart types. So the 2 is the helper. They see the world as being as helpful, not helpful. They are constantly driven to want to help, and they see their worth and their motivations around helping others. 3s are achievers. These are people, they can either be, they're not always super out building platforms, but their motivations are built on achieving things, being successful, moving forward, being performant or not performant is essentially how 3s think about the world. And 4, the final part of the heart type, 4s are extremely interested in authenticity, being their own people, being some people refer to 4s as the romantic, and they're usually very creative and very concerned about having their own voice and their own perspective in the world. And again, all of us have different aspects of all 9 of these numbers, but it's interesting to think about that way. And so the 2s, 3s, and 4s, the heart types, they feel things a lot differently, a lot more profoundly than all the other numbers. And it's a really interesting set of numbers to be in from those of us who aren't in there, because we just process the world very differently than the heart types. So anyway, those are 2, 3s, and 4s. 5s are it's now we're getting into the head types. 5, 6, and 7s are head types, and so 5s are all about wisdom, knowledge, books, ideas. Is that an insightful thing or not? So like 2s see things helpful, not helpful. 3s see things perform it, not perform it. 4s see things as authentic, not authentic. 5s see things as insightful, not insightful. So if you want to bore a 5, just do small talk all the time.
Talk about the weather. They'll just go nuts. Yeah. As somebody in my world, I work with a lot of 5s.
So just give them a good book and talk about different ideas, and you're going to make friends with 5s, and you're going to learn a ton as well. 6 are the loyalists. They see the world as loyal or not loyal, personalities and relationships as loyal or not, and having a freakish amount of skepticism for what's going on in the world and what people's motivations are, and that the house of cards are going to fall down in any particular moment. Those are sort of characteristics of a 6. 6, for me, 1, 2s, and 6s are the trickiest to sort of figure out. And so if you're a 6 listening to this, first of all, side comment, never type anybody else. You have to go through the soul work yourself to figure out what number you kind of lean toward. And but if you're a 6 listening, and I'd love to strike up a conversation, because I don't know too many 6s. I have a few friends in the 6 world, but I'd love to learn more about that. So anyway, 6 see loyal, not loyal. 7, this is where me and Saul are. We see the world as fun, not fun, stimulating, not stimulating. We're constantly on the go, on the go, on the go. But what we're learning is that
we need to slow down.
We need to slow down. We really need to learn how to say no. We really need to open up our emotions and learn how to empathize with people. Yeah. And I mean, 7s are prone to a lot of addiction. The really unhealthy 7s are socially inept, because they're in casinos and they're in and out of jail because they're just following
the next fun, right? I mean, it's like, what's the next excitement? one thing to just give you a note though, like we talked about earlier, like you'll get into the 8 here in a second and the 6. Maybe we'll come back to it, but there is a big difference between the me and you, like in the way we look at the 7, at least in our particular types. I lean more towards a 6, or at least that's how I feel. So I consider my wing, which you'll probably talk about to some people later, is a 6, where you seem to think yours is an 8. But we both sort of share the same vices that we have to run through our own vices, right? We still have to run and avoid our own. We try to avoid our own emotions. We try to, reframe things very quickly. We're very good at that. Like we still have all those same challenges, but our views and our actions are still different, which is really interesting to me. That's just because we're both 7s doesn't mean we're the same.
So the 6, they saw the loyalists. The 7, they call us the enthusiasts. I know these titles are still a little bit vague. Now an 8, they call the reformer. 8 see the world as powerful, not powerful. They're the people who speak up. I always wondered, who are all these people that are commenting online? Right? It's 8s. 8s have to speak up. They have to call it out. Like you're a born troll if you're an 8, and you're just getting stuff right. But 8s are the people who change the world. They're in control. They want to be in control. They're really concerned about self-protection, self-preservation. And so healthy 8s are amazing to have in your friend group and your company. Unhealthy 8s are dangerous and definitely in jail, hopefully, if they're still alive.
My youngest daughter, Vivian, she's an 8. So keep her on your happy side.
They'll speak up like a dinner table, like a Thanksgiving meal. Your uncle says something dumb. The 8s will speak up and call the uncle out on the table. No shame whatsoever.
No hesitation.
Those are 8s. So I'm a 7 wing 8. I lean a little bit to the 8. I definitely do not lean a little bit to the 6. I still have a lot to learn about 6s. And so my tri-type is actually 7-8-3. So I see the world as fun, not fun, and I'm an enthusiast. I like to do lots of different things. My proclivity is around calling out and being reformer, and like having a certain amount of calling out justice, calling out injustice when it needs to be called out, and I'm not afraid to confront people. And that's kind of the key thing about the 8s. The 8s just have no fear to just call people out and stuff.
Yeah.
And then the 3s are about performant, not performance. So the 7-8-3 is my what they call the tri-type. So anyway, those are the end of the head types. The 5, 6, and 7s are the head types. Now the 8s, these people that are the reformers, they're the final triad. It's called the gut types. And so the 8s are the people who call people out, in control. 9s are people like my amazing mother. They are the peacemakers. They empathize with all the numbers better than any other number. They're very concerned. They see things as peaceful, not peaceful. They're very concerned with harmony and resonance in their lives, in their families, in their friend groups, in their communities, in their state, in their country, in their world. And that's their whole mentality and the way they think about it. And the way that we see things as fun, not fun, they see things peaceful, not peaceful. And we owe a tremendous amount of gratitude to all the 9s out there. And I have a lot to learn, even more about my amazing mother, as even just over the holidays here, I've got to learn more about her and her own reflections being a 9. And then the final gut type is a 1. And a 1 is the perfectionist. They see the world.
Idealist too.
Idealistic. Idealist. There's different sort of nuances, and I'm still learning a ton about 1s. I'm married to a 1.
Me too.
They see the world. Their inner referee, in terms of is it perfect, not perfect, is super loud. And I'm just learning about this about my spouse, because I don't have a very loud internal referee. It's like if it's a shiny object, I'm chasing after it.
Yeah, same.
But ones see that as, is this the way it should be? Is this orderly? Is this perfect? And is this beautiful in an orderly way? And that I've heard from all my friends who are 1s is haunting to them. It can be sometimes crippling. Unhealthy 1s are just riddled in self-doubt and anxiety about everything around the world that's not perfect or not orderly or not ideal. And That being said, we would be a mess without ones in our lives.
Yep.
They are
Keep order. They keep the world together. They
they
keep it
keep the
falling
world
apart.
together, and we thank you. We thank you.
Ew,
We're the
so
ones.
much.
We owe a lot of gratitude. Anyway, so we Saul and I are learning about the Enneagram. It's important. I bring it up because I'm going to probably start doing some more writing this year about startups and the Enneagram and the way that you form your teams, the way you know yourself. In fact, at Proda, the last quarter, we started to get very serious about coaching, leadership coaching, executive coaching, personal coaching as a core part of the foundation of startups. Because as any investor will tell you, the reason why most startups fail is because of interpersonal conflicts. Something has gone wrong with the team or the CEO or somebody in the executive team.
It's always the problem.
And it leads to operational inefficiency and failure. And then, yes, they ran out of money or the competitors beat them or whatever. But the root issue is usually somewhere there. So taking a significant amount of stock in yourself, get the therapist, get the coach, get the medical professionals, get all the things, and do yourself a favor and learn about the Enneagram, because it's a great tool to help you and those that you love be more harmonious. Okay, final topic: New Year's resolutions. So over the years, being a 783, I have tried so many different New Year's resolutions, and obviously we all just fail at them shortly into the process.
Sure.
So then it became, okay, as an engineer, I like to write code. I like to think about building systems. I like to think about models. I like to think about models that work.
Yep.
What I learned, very related to my Enneagram type, is that one, just from a basic science perspective, you got to learn how it works. You got to learn the fundamentals, the first principles of physical and mental health, in as much as we know about the mental side of things. But there's a lot of research and a lot of different things you can learn about basic nutrition, health, and exercise. So New Year's resolution aside, if you haven't learned the basics, if you don't know how insulin works, if you don't know how sleep operates, how you can improve your sleep, if you don't know the different flavors of exercise, how you should be varying your workouts, do that work first. And then maybe think in 2022 about your resolutions, about how to execute it. But if you have some kind of basic understanding of how health science works, then my advice to you, I'm curious to hear what you saw. My advice to you is find the model that works. In the same way we talked about web development, mobile development, where it doesn't really matter what tool you use as long as it's relatively
as long as it works,
used out there. Find a regime that works for you and optimize that model over the years. You need to be thinking decades.
Yep.
You need to be thinking multiple years as you optimize your model, rather than fad diet to fad diet to fad diet to different exercise. You know, there's always another, whatever the latest PDX, what is it? PDX 9, PFDF 9. There was one of those.
P90X.
Challenge 30 or Challenge 70. Anyway, there's a new thing every year.
Yeah.
Find something that works for you. And that's just on the exercise. So most people's resolutions are around something around diet and exercise, something around time management, something about relationships with others, something about getting into flow and learning new things. And I would just say the two basic things I would say around this: you need to iterate with something that works with you and think long term. And then two, think about the value of compound interest, the value of doing a little thing. There's lots of different books around habit forming and things like that. Do a little thing every day, and then think about your 5, 10, 15-year plan. Because if you change a little bit over the course of a long period of time, you're gonna affect wide change. But if you try to do the short-term thing, it usually doesn't work. And most humans, we're terrible about compound interest thinking. We're bad about probabilities and things like that. So yeah, Saul, what's your take on New Year's resolutions?
Yeah, so a similar problem. I've never really had a good run of being successful with them. As a 7, I'm really good at starting things. So I've started a lot of changes in my life and never really finished them. I think the thing that I would echo that you said, as I grow up and became an adult, I woke up that little leader in me that, watched in the corner and observed from other great leaders in my life. And one thing I learned was that compound interest thing, there's a really easy formula to it. It's actually not hard. You don't have to do the whole big extrapolation plan 15 years in the future. What you do is every day you just don't be that guy. You don't be the dick. Right? You don't be that person, right? In the room. So you be that good Samaritan, right? You reach across the aisle and say, how can I help somebody that I don't understand? Like, you want to learn about sixes, right? Go find a six and find out what their passion is, because you're going to learn a lot about a six that way. I do that every day with every team member I ever meet. I've done that since I was 6 years old, right? And I think about that every day, because I think about as positive gameplay in my head. I'm just making the toys better with my friends. Now I've gotten better at not breaking their toys right away, and I work with them to help make their tools better. So my pay it forward message or pay it backwards message, just pay it to everybody. And it's all it takes is just a little bit of time to understand what they're passionate about and give a little bit of your superpower, which is something you learn from the last person. And that might be a contact, it might be a trick, it might be a piece of advice. But I think there's the whole thing. Like, people look at New Year's resolutions, the resolution should be, how can I always improve myself and everybody around me a little bit every day? Because that's the compound interest that pays off when you're in your 40s and you're realizing, oh, there's a lot of opportunity for me in the world because I've made a lot of really good investment of time with people. So yeah, I agree. Don't waste your time on the resolutions until you figure out the part about change. And that's creating the change around you. And that might be with you too. That's where I had to learn how to change some of my own stuff right now. So.
That's good. Well, any final words of advice or thoughts for the entrepreneurs, investors, and those curious about any of the different words that we'll have in the title of this episode?
Oh, I don't know. We got lots of words. I think one big last word of advice is, I think I mentioned earlier, never let a good problem go to waste. Make sure you create a strong team of subject matter experts over time. Best piece of advice I could ever give you, because every single person that's your employee in that startup is your representative of your problem that you solve. Think about that every day, because those people are your subject matter experts that you're trying to compound into your market. Think about it that way for once. That's a cool trick.
It's good. All right, Saul, thank you. Where can people find you online if they're interested in continuing the conversation with you?
Saul Cates. Twitter is at Saul Cates, SOLCATES.
Sweet. All right.
Awesome.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, a couple quick things before you go. Number one, I have a general newsletter where I write about technology and startups and health science and teaching people to code. And I write about a variety of different subjects that we talk about on this show. So if you go to wclittle.com, there you'll be able to subscribe, and you'll also be able to subscribe to particular topics. If you're just interested in one or a few of them, you'll be notified right when I publish new content in those areas. Number two, my partners and I at Proto Ventures have a portfolio company called Startup Rocket. If you go to startuprocket.com, there you'll be able to receive coaching guides and customize an operations framework for you and your team and your advisors to be on the same page in terms of what is the appropriate next step for you and your entrepreneurial journey. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review anywhere that you have listened to this podcast or watched this podcast, it would be super helpful to help those who might be interested in consuming this content as well. Thank you.